One of the enemy's most effective strategies is to get you to focus on what you don't have, what you used to have, or what someone else has that you wished you had. He does this to keep you from looking around and asking God, God, what can you do through me with what I do have? Our culture influences us to be discontent by teaching us to play by the wrong set of rules. Here's the truth. It is possible for human beings to go their whole life saying, I will be content when. If only I could have, then I will be content for the rest of my life. And here's the choice. You can say, I will be happy, I will be content when, and you fill in the blank. Or you can say, I will learn to be content right now. The Apostle Paul in prison, so many ups and downs in his life. He finally got to a point, he says, you know what? I have learned, underline learned, he learned to be content whatever the circumstances. How do you learn contentment? Because it naturally doesn't happen to us as humans. Mass confession. Here we go. If over the last month you have complained about money or about your weight, or about your in-laws' money, or about your in-laws' weight, or about traffic, or about health, or your lack of possessions, or about a relationship, or about the food you eat, or about the election, or about the weather, it's too hot or it's too cold, about the speed of your Wi-Fi, or anything else, how many of you, by a raise of hands, have complained at least once in the last month? Raise your hands, raise them high. If you're in a home group, look around. You got a bunch of complainers in your home group. Because it's our human nature. Sociologist Robert Hughes wrote one of the more influential critiques of American culture. And he says if you have to summarize what to call our society in a nutshell, he would call it the culture of complaint. People perceive themselves to be entitled to have all their desires fulfilled, or else they deem themselves victim status when it doesn't happen. We live, he says, in a culture of complaint. And friends, it forms our minds, our hearts, our souls, our desires. Contentment is not a result of external circumstances lining up right. Contentment is a byproduct of a certain kind of character, a certain kind of thinking. Contentment is something developed from the inside. Contentment does not magically descend upon you. It's a byproduct of a certain kind of a character, a certain kind of mindset, and it flows out of the living awareness of the goodness of God. Who am I going to make responsible for the contentment of my life? And the only adequate answer is, I have to take responsibility for living with contentment in my life. Not my boss, not my spouse, not my kids, not my friends. You and I cannot dare put our happiness, our joy, our contentment in the hands of another person. You and I dare not wait for someone or something to come along so that we can become content. We have to take the responsibility ourselves. Paul says, I have learned how to be content. When should we practice contentment? When should we? Well, let me read you Psalm 118:24, and you tell me. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. It's very interesting. The psalmist does not say, yesterday was the day God made. We were sure happy then. The psalmist does not say, tomorrow is the day that God will make. I will be content when tomorrow comes. If we are going to experience contentment, it must be today, for this is the day the Lord has made. This is the day for which Christ died for. Today, I want you to see how long you can go without complaining, starting now. See if you can measure it in terms of minutes or hours or maybe seconds. See if you can make it through the whole day. See if you can bleed it into tomorrow and the rest of the week. Today, give lavish expressions of thanksgiving. Write a note to someone telling them how thankful you are for them. Write down all the things you're grateful. Allow today contentment to rule your mind, your heart, and your actions. Every time you experience joy or pleasure today, thank God. When you eat a great meal today, thank God. Today, Live58 Church, we're making this a no complaint day. What about when I'm disappointed? What about when I'm going through tough times? What about when things aren't good? When I'm living with deep disappointments, then I'd like to ask you to do something the Scripture asks us to practice. And this is what I might call defiant contentment. I want you to practice during tough times defiant contentment. Now, some of you are rebels, so you like the word defiant. So I dare you to be a rebel with contentment. Because here it is, and the phrase will be up on the screen. Here it is. Contentment in this world, your world and mine, contentment will always be contentment in spite of something. Well, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is wonderful enough for me? Where do you draw the line? What is wonderful enough for me? You see, again, we go through this illusion. If I just had, you fill in the blank. If I just had, what would be wonderful enough for you and make you content the rest of your life? Better job, more money, a spouse, a better spouse, a house, a better house, children, better children. You see, this kind of contentment that our culture promises us is like cotton candy. It might taste good for a while, but it doesn't fill us up and it leaves us empty. You get a new car. You ever get a new car and it smells good for a while? Then you get the first door ding and the first spill and the first payment, and you no longer have the rush of happiness when you see it. It's cotton candy. You meet an amazing person, and for a while you can't sleep, work, or do anything without thinking about this perfect human being God has given you. Then it's not long before you realize this spectacular person has some quirks, and they do some things that irritate you, and they have bad breath. And the feeling of euphoria you felt for the first week leaves, and reality sets in, and the real work of love begins. Cotton candy. You join a church and the music grabs hold of your soul, and you're amazed how brilliant and relevant the person who is giving the message is. And then you keep coming and the music loses some of its emotional edge, and there's a song the worship team does too often and it's getting on your nerves, and the guy who's given the message tells the same joke too often and is a little long-winded at times, and you realize he is not as brilliant and as relevant as you thought, and you have to decide, is your belief in God deeper than a feeling? And the real work of faith begins. Cotton candy. Here it is, friends. We can spend our whole entire lives filling in the blank, but we can find contentment that is found inside, that is not fragile, that is not dependent on our circumstances.